Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Tonight, we set out on a gentle journey through the heart of Middle-earth, a tale whispered by moonlight and cradled in the arms of ancient hills. The soft glow of twilight settles over the Shire, casting long shadows across the gentle hills. The world seems to exhale, the warmth of day giving way to the cool hush of evening. A golden light spills from round windows, and the faint sound of laughter drifts from a distant hobbit gathering. It's in moments like these, my sleepy fellows, that stories take shape, not in grand halls or bustling cities, but in the quiet corners of the world, where dreams and reality often meet. Tonight, I invite you to join me on such a journey, one that winds through ancient lands, past forgotten ruins, and into the heart of Middle-earth's most guarded secret. This is the tale of the road to Mount Doom, not told in hurried whispers or urgent cries, but as a gentle recollection, like an old friend recounting a memory by the fireside. It's a story not just of courage, but of quiet resilience, the kind that grows in the heart when all hope seems lost. Our path begins, as many do, in the green heart of the Shire, but it will lead us far beyond the rolling hills and lazy rivers. We'll tread softly through moonlit forests, cross ancient stone bridges, and rest beside crystal-clear streams. There will be meetings with wise wanderers and fleeting glimpses of shadowed threats. But fear not, this tale unfolds slowly, like a dream, guiding you gently toward rest rather than adventure's edge. If you find peace in stories spun from moonlight and starlight, let this tale be your companion tonight. And if you enjoy this journey, consider staying for more stories, more quiet paths, more gentle voices to lull you into sleep. Now, my sleepy fellows, draw your blanket close, let the weight of the day fall away, and allow yourself to drift with us into the heart of Middle-earth. The road awaits, but we'll walk it without haste, step by soothing step, until dreams take hold and carry you the rest of the way. The evening breeze drifted through the Shire, rustling the leaves of the tall oaks that stood like silent guardians along the winding paths. The sun had dipped behind the hills, leaving the sky awash in soft purples and golds, as if Middle-earth itself were settling into slumber. Within the heart of this peaceful land, tucked beneath a green hill, stood a round, cheerful hobbit hole, its circular windows glowing warmly like lanterns against the dusk. Inside, Frodo Baggins sat quietly by the hearth, his book resting open upon his lap, though his eyes had wandered from the page to the flickering flames. The world outside was calm, and the familiar comforts of home wrapped around him like an old, well-loved blanket. Yet, beneath the tranquility, there was something else, a quiet awareness, a weight that had settled upon his heart ever since that fateful conversation with Gandalf. Ah, Gandalf, the Grey Wanderer, the bringer of fireworks and riddles, wisdom and warning. He had come to the Shire not long ago, his tall frame stooping slightly to pass beneath the low archways of Bag End, his blue hat brushing the doorframe. Though he often brought laughter and light, this time his face had been shadowed by worry, and his words had carried the gravity of ancient knowledge. "Keep it secret, keep it safe," Gandalf had murmured, his eyes flickering like the very fire that now danced in Frodo's hearth. It was not the usual kind of task one might expect to fall upon a hobbit's shoulders. Hobbits, after all, were known for their love of quiet, predictable days, gardening, tea drinking, and second breakfasts. They were not the sort to get tangled in the affairs of wizards and dark lords. And yet, here Frodo sat, the small golden ring resting in the depths of his waistcoat pocket, feeling heavier than it had any right to be. The ring, such an innocent thing to look at, smooth and unmarked, yet holding within it the weight of countless lives, battles fought and lost, kingdoms risen and fallen. To hold it was to hold history itself, a history laced with shadow. Samwise Gamgee, ever faithful and ever curious, peeked through the round window, his face half hidden by the ivy that framed the glass. He had promised Gandalf to keep an eye on Frodo, though the promise had been more of a delighted duty than a burden. For Sam, any chance to walk the wild paths beyond the Shire, to see elves and mountains and rivers older than memory, was a chance worth taking. But for Frodo, it was different. This was not adventure for adventure's sake. It was a calling, a quiet urging that tugged at his heart each night as the moon rose. The road was calling, not with the excitement of discovery, but with the soft inevitability of duty. To stay was to risk the peace of all he loved. To go was to step into a world far greater and more dangerous than any hobbit should know. And so, on this quiet evening, as the last light faded from the sky and the stars blinked awake, Frodo sat by the fire, unaware that his life was poised on the edge of change. The Shire slept peacefully around him, but in the distance shadows moved, and the long road to Mount Doom stretched quietly into the unknown. The night air hung cool and quiet over Bag End as Frodo Baggins stood at his round green door, gazing out at the Shire. The fields rolled gently under the silver moonlight, dotted with the soft glow of lanterns hanging from hobbit hole porches. It was a scene of peace, the kind that had defined Frodo's life until now. Yet peace, he knew, was fragile. He could feel the weight of the small golden ring in his pocket, heavier than its size should allow. Gandalf's words echoed in his mind. Keep it secret, keep it safe. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting flickering shadows across the room as Frodo turned back inside. Samwise Gamgee, ever watchful and ever loyal, sat on the edge of a chair, hands clasped together, eyes filled with quiet concern. He'd heard enough from Gandalf to know that whatever burden Frodo carried, it was no ordinary trinket. It was something ancient, powerful, and dangerous. "Do you really think we should wait here, Mr. Frodo?" Sam asked, voice hushed as if the very walls might overhear. Gandalf said he'd come back, but it's been days now. Frodo sighed, running a hand through his dark curls. "I don't know, Sam. I trust Gandalf, but something feels wrong. The Shire is safe, but for how long? If this thing brings danger, I can't let it come here." A log cracked in the fire, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken thoughts. Frodo's gaze fell upon his pack, half filled with supplies, as if his mind had already made the decision his heart resisted. It was then that a faint tapping came at the window. Both hobbits froze, eyes darting toward the sound. But it was no sinister visitor, just a small brown bird fluttering against the glass before darting off into the night. Harmless. Yet Frodo couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away, like sand through his fingers. "We can't wait any longer," Frodo said, standing abruptly. "If Gandalf were coming, he'd be here by now. Whatever's keeping him, I can't risk staying. We'll go quietly, head toward Bree. Gandalf will find us if he can." Sam's face tightened with determination. "Then I'm coming with you, Mr. Frodo. You'll not go sneaking off without me." Frodo smiled faintly. There was no arguing with Sam once his mind was set. And truth be told, the thought of facing the unknown alone was more daunting than he cared to admit. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, they slipped out of Bag End. Frodo, Sam, and the ring, leaving behind the warmth of home for the uncertain road ahead. The grass was damp with dew, the air crisp and still. Even the birds seemed hesitant to sing, as if sensing the gravity of their quiet departure. Their path led them through fields familiar and well-trodden, past hedgerows bursting with the last blooms of summer, and across narrow footbridges spanning gentle streams. Yet with each step, the comfort of home fell further behind, and the world grew larger and less certain. By midday, they reached the edge of the woody end, where the trees stood tall and close, their branches weaving a canopy that dappled the ground with shifting patterns of light and shadow. It was here, amid the quiet rustle of leaves, that the first prick of unease touched Frodo's heart. "Do you hear that?" he whispered, halting mid-step. Sam paused, head tilted. "Hear what?" Silence, not the soft, natural silence of the woods, but something deeper, heavier, like the world holding its breath. Then, faint and distant, came the sound of hooves, a slow, deliberate rhythm, growing closer. "Down!" Frodo hissed, pulling Sam behind a thick cluster of brambles. They crouched low, hearts pounding, as the rider came into view. Cloaked in black from head to toe, the figure sat astride a tall, dark horse, its breath misting in the cool air. The rider's hood was drawn deep, face hidden in shadow, but there was an unmistakable presence, cold, oppressive, like a chill that seeped into the bones. Frodo's hand went instinctively to his pocket, fingers brushing the ring. At that moment, the rider seemed to pause, head turning slowly, as if sensing something unseen. Frodo held his breath, willing himself to be nothing more than another shadow among the leaves. The moment stretched unbearably, until at last the rider urged the horse onward, the sound of hooves fading into the distance. "What was that?" Sam whispered, voice tight with fear. "I don't know," Frodo replied, voice equally strained, but it was looking for something or someone. The ring felt warmer against his skin, and he pulled his hand away as if burned. Whatever peace the Shire had offered was well and truly behind them now. They pressed on, skirting the edges of the forest, taking less traveled paths where the grass grew tall and wild. Every shadow seemed deeper, every rustling branch more sinister, Yet they were not entirely alone. Now and then, they caught glimpses of movement among the trees, small, quick figures, light on their feet, watching silently. "Do you think they're elves?" Sam asked, hope flickering in his voice. "Maybe," Frodo said, though he couldn't be sure. The Shire was far from elvish lands, but strange things were stirring, and not all strangers were foes. As evening fell, they made camp in a hollow beneath an old oak, the fire kept low and the conversation quieter still. Frodo sat with his back to the tree, eyes on the stars peeking through the branches. "What do you think Gandalf would say, seeing us out here like this?" Sam murmured, pulling his cloak tighter around his shoulders. Frodo smiled faintly. "He'd probably call us fools and send us straight back home." But there was no going back now. The road stretched ahead, winding toward Bree and beyond, into dangers they could only guess. Frodo fingered the chain around his neck, feeling the weight of the ring once more. The world was larger and darker than he had ever imagined, but somewhere beyond the horizon, hope flickered like a distant star, faint but unyielding. The sun hung low in the sky as Frodo and Sam trudged along the narrow path that wound through the edge of the Chetwood, the dark canopy of trees casting long, flickering shadows across the ground. The forest, though not sinister, carried an air of quiet watchfulness. Birds flitted through the branches, but their songs were subdued, as if they, too, were wary of drawing attention. They had left Bree behind, the memory of the prancing pony still fresh in their minds, the warmth of the fire, the murmured conversations, and the sharp, watchful eyes of Strider, the ranger who had now become their unexpected guide. Aragorn, he had called himself, though Frodo still struggled to reconcile the rough-clad wanderer with the name that carried whispers of ancient kings. "Do you trust him, Mr. Frodo?" Sam asked quietly, glancing toward the ranger, who walked a few paces ahead, his keen gaze sweeping the forest with practiced ease. Frodo hesitated. Trust was a luxury he could ill afford, yet there was something in Aragorn's manner, calm, resolute, and without guile, that made suspicion seem almost petty. "I think we must," Frodo replied. "Gandalf trusted him, and we've little choice but to do the same." Sam grumbled something under his breath, but said no more. He, too, felt the weight of the unknown pressing down, each step away from the Shire, pulling them further into a world of shadows and secrets. As dusk settled, Aragorn led them to a sheltered glade beneath the twisted limbs of an ancient oak. The ground was soft with moss, the air cool and scented with earth and fallen leaves. A small fire crackled between the stones Aragorn had carefully arranged, its light dancing across the weary faces of the travelers. "We'll rest here for the night," Aragorn said, lowering his pack. "The road ahead grows rougher, and the hills of Weathertop rise not far from here. If Gandalf passed this way, that's where he would have gone to leave word." Frodo nodded, though the mention of Gandalf brought a pang of worry. It had been too long since they'd seen the wizard, and the absence of any sign or message gnawed at the edges of his hope. "Why Weathertop?" Sam asked, stretching his legs out by the fire. "It's an old watchtower," Aragorn explained, his voice low and steady. The men of Arnor built it long ago to guard the land. From its peak, you can see leagues in every direction. If Gandalf wished to signal, that would be the place. Silence has settled over them as they ate their simple meal of bread and dried fruit, the fire's warmth a small comfort against the chill creeping into the air. Frodo found his gaze drawn to the stars, glittering coldly above the treetops, and wondered if Gandalf was somewhere beneath that same sky, looking for them. It was near midnight when Frodo woke suddenly, heart pounding in his chest. The fire had burned low, casting faint shadows across the clearing. For a moment, he couldn't place what had roused him, until he heard it, a faint, rhythmic sound, like the distant thud of hooves on soft earth. He sat up, breath settled in his throat. Across the fire, Aragorn was already awake, one hand resting on the hilt of his sword, eyes narrowed toward the darkness beyond the trees. "Get down," Aragorn whispered harshly, and Frodo obeyed without question, shaking Sam awake as he did. The sound grew louder, closer, until the shape of a rider emerged from the shadows, a tall, hooded figure astride a black horse, its eyes gleaming like coals. The rider moved slowly, deliberately, as if searching for something or someone. Frodo's hand crept to his pocket, fingers brushing the cold metal of the ring. The urge to slip it on, to vanish from sight, was almost overwhelming, like a whisper in his mind, insistent and seductive. Put it on, hide, escape. But another voice, quieter but firmer, held him back. Gandalf's warning, sharp and clear: do not tempt fate. The ring is no friend to you. The rider paused, head turning slowly toward their hiding place. Frodo froze, hardly daring to breathe. Then, without warning, Aragorn sprang into motion, leaping across the fire and flinging a burning brand toward the figure. The horse reared, and the rider hissed, a sound like steel drawn across stone, before wheeling around and vanishing into the night. "Black riders," Aragorn muttered, face grim as he kicked dirt over the fire. "They found our trail." Frodo swallowed hard, the weight of the ring heavier than ever. "What do they want?" "The ring," Aragorn replied, eyes dark with concern. "They are the Nazgul, the ring wraiths, servants of Sauron, drawn to the ring like wolves to blood." Sam's face paled. "And they know we're here?" "Yes," Aragorn said, already gathering their packs. "We must move, now." They traveled through the night, sticking to narrow paths and shadowed glens, the moon their only guide. Frodo's mind churned with fear and uncertainty, the revelation of their pursuers stripping away any illusion of safety. The Black Riders were no mere legend. They were real, relentless, and far too close. By dawn, they reached the foot of Weathertop, its broken crown rising stark against the pale sky. Aragorn led them up a winding path, every step a struggle against exhaustion. At the summit, the remnants of ancient walls stood in jagged silhouettes, weathered by time and forgotten battles. "There," Aragorn said, pointing to a blackened patch of stone near the center. "A fire was lit here not long ago. Gandalf was here." Frodo's heart lifted, but the feeling was short-lived. Scattered around the ashes were deep scorch marks, as if lightning had struck the ground repeatedly. "A battle," Aragorn murmured, voice tight with concern. Gandalf fought here, but he is gone now. Whether he escaped or was taken, I cannot say. Despair settled over Frodo like a cold mantle. They were alone once more, the weight of the quest pressing down with renewed force. "We can't stay," Aragorn continued, scanning the horizon. "The Nazgul will follow us here, and we've no defenses worth speaking of. We must reach Rivendell." Rivendell. The name was like a balm, conjuring images of safety and wisdom, of Elrond's house hidden deep in the valley. But it was far, and danger lay in every shadowed hollow between here and there. As they descended Weathertop, Frodo's steps grew heavier. He clutched the ring through the fabric of his vest, its cold surface smooth beneath his fingertips. The midpoint of their journey had brought no comfort, only the stark revelation of what hunted them and how little stood between the darkness and the world they loved. But amid the fear, there flickered something else: resolve. The road was perilous, the enemy powerful, but Frodo understood now, more than ever, why the ring could not remain in the Shire, nor anywhere else it might be found. It was not just his burden, but the burden of all who cherished peace and freedom. And so, with the rising sun casting long shadows behind them, they pressed on, each step a quiet defiance against the growing shadow. The journey was far from over, but they would walk it together, guided by hope and the faint promise of sanctuary in the hidden valley of Rivendell. The sun had barely risen when Aragorn led Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin down the winding slopes of Weathertop. The chill of dawn clung to the air, and the earth was damp with dew, but there was little time to appreciate the gentle beauty of the morning. The memory of the Black Rider's hiss and the scorched stones of the summit lingered in Frodo's mind, a stark reminder that danger was ever near. Aragorn moved with swift confidence, his sharp eyes scanning the path ahead and the dense woodlands that stretched toward the east. His hand rarely left the hilt of his sword, and Durrell, though he spoke softly to the hobbits, urging them onward with quiet reassurance. "We follow the road for a time," Aragorn murmured, "but not long. The Nazgul will watch the main paths. We must take the hidden ways, paths known only to those who walk these lands in silence and shadow." Sam, trudging along with a determined but weary step, glanced at Frodo. "Hidden paths, Mr. Frodo? I hope they're not too wild. I've had enough wildness for a lifetime." Frodo offered a faint smile, though worry gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. He tightened his cloak around his shoulders, feeling the weight of the ring against his chest, cold and unyielding despite the warmth of his body. The path soon veered from the east road, winding into a dense thicket of birch and ash. The forest here was old, the trees standing like silent sentinels, their pale trunks dappled with moss and lichen. The ground, soft with fallen leaves, muffled their footsteps, and the only sounds were the gentle rustling of branches and the occasional chirp of a bird flitting through the canopy. As they moved deeper into the woods, Aragorn slowed, his expression thoughtful. He knelt beside the faint trace of a trail, fingers brushing the earth with practiced care. "Someone passed here not long ago," he murmured. "Light of foot, no heavy burden. Elves, perhaps." "Elves?" Pippin's eyes widened, momentarily forgetting his weariness. "Do you think they'd help us?" Aragorn nodded slowly. "If they find us first, yes. But the elves of these woods are watchful and wary. We must be no threat." They pressed on, the forest thickening around them until the light of the sun filtered through in soft, green-hued beams. The air was cool and faintly fragrant, with the scent of pine and earth. Frodo found the quiet soothing, though a lingering tension sat at the back of his mind, like an itch he couldn't quite scratch. By midday, they reached a small clearing where an ancient oak stood, its gnarled roots spreading out like the fingers of some sleeping giant. Aragorn called for a brief rest, and the hobbits gratefully sank onto the soft grass, pulling out what little food they carried: bread, dried fruit, and a few apples Sam had stubbornly insisted on packing. As they ate, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The usual hum of insects and birds had quieted, replaced by an almost reverent stillness. Frodo glanced around, unease prickling along his spine. "Strider," he whispered, "do you hear that?" Aragorn nodded, already on his feet, hand resting lightly on the pommel of his sword. "We are not alone." The words had barely left his lips when a soft voice, melodic and clear as silver chimes, drifted from the trees. "Peace, Dunedain. You walk under the eaves of the elves, and we mean you no harm." From the shadows stepped three figures, tall and graceful, clad in cloaks of forest green and silver. Their hair, pale as moonlight, flowed over their shoulders, and their eyes, keen and ancient, rested upon the travelers with quiet curiosity. The leader, an elf whose bearing spoke of both wisdom and strength, inclined his head toward Aragorn. "It is rare to see a son of Arathorn treading these paths. What brings you so far from the lands of men?" Aragorn bowed low. "Urgent business, my lord. We seek safe passage eastward, away from prying eyes." The elf's gaze flickered to Frodo, and for a moment his expression softened, as though he saw more than what lay before him. "You carry a heavy burden, small one that draws shadows behind you." Frodo swallowed hard, fingers brushing the edge of his pocket where the ring lay hidden. He nodded, but said nothing. "Come," the elf continued, gesturing toward the deeper woods. "The Lady of the Wood has spoken of your coming. We shall not hinder your path, but there is much you should know. Darkness stirs in the east, and even the trees whisper of unrest." Without further word, the elves turned and glided silently into the forest. Aragorn followed without hesitation, and the hobbits scrambled to their feet, exchanging wide-eyed glances. "They just appeared," Sam muttered, half in awe, half in suspicion. "Like ghosts, they were." But Frodo found comfort in their presence, as though the weight of the ring had lessened, if only by a fraction. He quickened his pace, eager to learn what warnings the elves might share. The path led them to a hidden glade where the trees stood tall and proud, their leaves shimmering like emeralds in the filtered sunlight. In the center of the clearing stood a slender figure, clad in robes of pale blue and silver, her dark hair crowned with a circlet of silver leaves. She turned as they approached, her face calm and wise, with eyes that seemed to see into the very heart of the world. May Govenen, friends, she said, her voice like the murmur of a gentle stream. I am Narthiel, guardian of this glade. Word has reached us of your quest and of the shadow that follows you. Aragorn stepped forward, bowing deeply. Narthiel, we seek safe passage eastward toward Rivendell. The Black Riders are abroad, and the ring must not fall into their grasp. Narthiel's gaze settled on Frodo, and she nodded slowly. Yes, the ring. We feel its presence, faint but undeniable, like a storm gathering on a distant horizon. Come, sit with us a while. There is knowledge here that may aid you. They gathered around a small fire, though it gave no smoke and seemed to warm the air without scorching the earth. As the hobbits rested, Narthiel spoke of the land they traversed, of ancient battles fought, and long-forgotten roads hidden beneath moss and stone. This forest remembers, she said, fingers trailing through the grass. It was once part of the kingdom of Arnor, long before it fell into ruin. The men of that age built watchtowers and hidden paths, many now reclaimed by the earth. Few know of them, but they still offer safe passage to those who walk in peace. She paused, eyes narrowing slightly. But shadows move where none should tread. Southward, near the Midgewater marshes, strange lights have been seen at night, pale and flickering, like lanterns carried by unseen hands. And in the hills beyond, shepherds speak of whispers on the wind, voices that chill the heart and drive men from their flocks. Frodo shivered, the image of the Black Riders fresh in his mind. Could it be the Nazgul? Narthiel shook her head. Not them, I think. They are fear made flesh, while this feels older, wilder. The remnants of ancient sorcery, perhaps, stirred by the growing shadow in Mordor. Aragorn frowned, deep in thought. Then we must avoid the marshes and keep to the northern paths. Speed is our ally, but not at the cost of caution. Narthiel nodded. Wise counsel. We will guide you as far as the Weather Hills. Beyond that, you must tread carefully and trust to your strength and wit. As the fire burned low and twilight crept through the trees, the elves sang soft songs of ages past, tales of Beren and Luthien, of Gil-galad's last stand, and of the stars that shone over Valinor before the world was bent. The words, though foreign to the hobbits, carried a soothing cadence, and one by one they drifted into uneasy sleep, dreams filled with glimpses of far-off lands and shadowed paths. Frodo, half waking near dawn, found Narthiel standing at the edge of the clearing, her gaze fixed eastward. Do you ever tire of watching? He asked quietly, moving to stand beside her. She smiled faintly, eyes never leaving the horizon. Tire? No, but my heart grows heavy with what I see. The world darkens, little one, and though hope remains, it is a fragile thing, like moonlight on still water. Frodo nodded, the ring cold against his skin. Hope is all we have. Narthiel glanced down at him, her expression softening. And it may be enough, remember this, Frodo Baggins. Even the smallest light can hold back the deepest shadow. Walk in peace, and may the stars shine upon your road. With the first light of dawn filtering through the trees, they parted from the elves, their hearts a little heavier, but their purpose clearer. The journey eastward lay before them, treacherous and uncertain, but they were not entirely without allies, nor without hope. And so, with the quiet songs of the elves fading behind them, they stepped once more into the wild, the road stretching long and winding into the unknown. The sun had dipped below the jagged peaks of the Eiffel Duath, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape that stretched toward Mordor. The weight of the journey pressed down upon Frodo and Sam as they trudged forward, their steps slow and labored. Behind them, the memory of their encounter with the elves lingered like a fading dream, a brief moment of solace before the true test began. Aragorn led the way, his keen eyes sweeping the horizon for any sign of danger. The faint traces of an old path wound through the barren hills, barely discernible beneath tufts of dry grass and scattered stones. It was a path long forgotten, known only to those who remembered the ancient days when Arnor stood strong and watchful. "We're close now," Aragorn murmured, pausing to study the land ahead. "Beyond that ridge lies the pass that will take us around the marshes. If fortune favors us, we'll reach the hidden hollow by nightfall." Sam, his face streaked with dust and weariness, tightened his grip on his pack. "I'll not be sorry to leave these hills behind, Mr. Frodo. They've a cold feel to them, like they've seen too much sorrow." Frodo nodded, the weight of the ring ever present against his chest. Each step forward felt heavier, as though the very earth resisted their passage. But he pressed on, driven by a quiet determination that had taken root deep within his heart. As they crested the ridge, the landscape unfurled before them, an expanse of broken hills and winding ravines, with the faint glimmer of water far to the south. But it was not the land that caught Aragorn's attention. It was the faint shimmer of torchlight, flickering like restless fireflies along the edge of the marsh. "The dead lights," Aragorn muttered, eyes narrowing. "They wander too close to the old paths. Something stirs them." Frodo shivered, recalling the elves' warning. Could it be the Nazgul? Aragorn shook his head. "No, this is older, wilder, a remnant of ancient sorcery, perhaps, echoes of the wars that scarred these lands long ago." Even as he spoke, the lights shifted, moving against the wind, weaving through the marsh like pale specters. The hobbits watched in uneasy silence, the air growing colder with each passing moment. "We can't linger here," Aragorn decided, turning eastward. "There's another way, steeper, but safer. Come." They descended into a narrow ravine, the walls rising high on either side, sheltering them from the prying eyes of the marsh. The path was treacherous, scattered with loose stones and tangled roots, but they moved swiftly, driven by an unspoken urgency. Night fell quickly, the sky deepening to indigo as stars blinked to life overhead. They made camp in the shadow of a crumbling rock face, the flicker of a small fire casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. As Sam prepared a simple meal, hardtack, dried fruit, and a precious handful of herbs gifted by the elves, Frodo sat apart, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The ring felt heavier than ever, its cold surface pressing against his skin, a constant reminder of the task ahead. "You're quiet tonight," Sam observed, settling beside him with 2 tin cups of steaming tea. "What's on your mind, Mr. Frodo?" Frodo accepted the cup with a faint smile. "Everything and nothing. We're so close now, Sam. I can almost feel the weight of Mordor pressing against the air. It's like walking toward a storm you can't outrun." Sam nodded thoughtfully, blowing on his tea. "A storm, maybe, but storms pass, don't they? And when they do, the sun shines all the brighter." The words offered little comfort, but Frodo appreciated the sentiment. He sipped his tea in silence, the warmth spreading through his chest, easing the ache of exhaustion. Suddenly, Aragorn stiffened, his hand flashing to Andúril. "Quiet," he hissed, rising to his feet. The hobbits froze, ears straining against the silence. For a moment, all seemed still, until the faintest whisper drifted down the ravine, like dry leaves brushing stone. It was a voice, distant and hollow, speaking words too ancient to understand. Frodo's heart quickened. He reached instinctively for the ring, his fingers brushing the chain that held it fast. "Up," Aragorn commanded, extinguishing the fire with a swift kick of sand. "We move, now." They scrambled to their feet, gathering their packs as the whispering grew louder, echoing off the walls of the ravine. Pale lights flickered at the edge of sight, weaving through the shadows like will-o'-the-wisps. "This way!" Aragorn led them up a narrow path that hugged the cliffside, the ground falling away steeply to the left. The trail was treacherous, the loose gravel shifting beneath their feet, but they pressed on, driven by a primal urgency. As they climbed higher, the whispering faded, swallowed by the wind that swept down from the mountains. Only when they reached the crest of the ridge did Aragorn allow them to pause, his breath coming fast and hard. "They won't follow us here," he said, eyes scanning the darkness below. "Whatever stirs the marsh is bound to the lowlands. It cannot climb." Frodo sank to the ground, chest heaving. What was it? "Old magic," Aragorn replied grimly. "Not Sauron's, but ancient still, echoes of the wars that ravaged these lands. Spirits bound to earth and water, restless and blind. They seek warmth, life, but they cannot take it." Sam shuddered. "Well, I'll not be offering them mine, thank you kindly." The rest of the night passed in uneasy silence, each hour marked by the slow crawl of moonlight across the rocky ground. Frodo slept fitfully, dreams tangled with flickering lights and hollow voices, while Sam stood watch, his faithful heart refusing rest until dawn. When the first pale light of morning touched the sky, they resumed their journey, the land sloping gently downward toward the hidden hollow Aragorn had spoken of. The marsh lay far behind, its restless lights dim in the distance, but the weight of their encounter lingered like a shadow. By midday, they reached a shallow valley where the earth dipped into a sheltered glen, dotted with wildflowers that swayed gently in the breeze. It was a place untouched by darkness, where the sun warmed the ground and the air smelled of fresh earth and pine. Aragorn knelt, pressing his hand to the soil. "We rest here. This place is clean, free of shadow. The elves called it Neldoril, the Hollow of Peace." Gratefully, the hobbits shed their packs and sank into the soft grass, the tension of the night slowly ebbing away. For the first time in days, Frodo felt the weight of the ring lessen, as though the earth itself offered quiet resistance to its dark pull. "Not all paths are shadowed," Aragorn murmured, stretching out beneath a swaying ash tree. "There is light still in the forgotten corners of the world." Frodo nodded, eyes closing as sleep claimed him, the gentle rustle of leaves lulling him into dreams untouched by fear. And so, in the heart of a forgotten glen, they found brief respite, a fleeting moment of peace before the road bent once more toward shadow and sacrifice. But even as they rested, the dawn rose bright and clear, a promise that light, however fragile, would always find its way through the darkness. The sun hung low over the distant peaks of the Ifil Duath, casting long golden rays across the rugged terrain. The air, once thick with tension and shadow, now carried the crisp scent of pine and earth. In the hollow of Neldoril, where the wildflowers danced gently in the breeze, peace had settled like a comforting blanket. Frodo stirred, his eyes fluttering open to the soft light filtering through the ash tree's branches. For the first time in what felt like weeks, he woke without the oppressive weight of dread pressing against his heart. The ring still hung from its chain around his neck, cold and heavy, but in this place its pull seemed dulled, like a distant echo rather than an urgent call. Sam sat nearby, carefully tending a small fire with the last of the dry wood they had gathered the night before. His face, lined with worry and weariness, softened as he noticed Frodo waking. "Morning, Mr. Frodo," Sam said quietly, offering a faint smile, "or near enough to it, I suppose. Didn't want to wake you. You were sleeping peaceful-like for once." Frodo sat up slowly, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. The warmth of the sun on his face felt almost foreign after so many days under shadowed skies. He glanced around, finding Aragorn standing at the edge of the glen, eyes fixed on the horizon. "How long did I sleep?" Frodo asked, stretching sore limbs. "Long enough," Aragorn replied without turning. "The land itself seems to have watched over us. No threats stirred in the night, no restless lights from the marshes. It's rare to find such peace in these lands." Sam handed Frodo a small tin cup, steam rising from the fragrant tea within. "Herbs from the elves," Sam explained, "said they'd help keep our spirits up without stirring the mind too much. Figured you could use a bit of both." Frodo accepted the cup gratefully, savoring the warmth as he took a slow sip. The tea tasted of mint and something sweeter, like the faint memory of spring blossoms. For a while, they sat in silence, each lost in thought. The journey ahead loomed large in their minds, but here, in this hollow untouched by shadow, it was easy to imagine a world beyond the task that awaited them, a world where peace was more than a fleeting moment stolen from the edge of despair. Aragorn finally turned, his gaze softening as it fell upon the hobbits. "This place was known to the rangers of old," he said quietly, "a refuge for those who guarded the north in secret when the kingdoms of men had fallen and hope was but a whisper. It seems the earth remembers those days still and offers shelter to those who walk with light in their hearts." Frodo nodded slowly, fingers tightening around the cup. "It's hard to hold on to that light sometimes," he admitted, Every step closer to Mordor feels like stepping deeper into shadow. I wonder if I'll even recognize the sun when this is done. Sam, ever the steadfast heart, leaned closer. You'll know it, Mr. Frodo. You'll know it because you'll be the one who brought it back. Shadows can't stand against light, not when folks like you keep carrying it forward. The words hung between them, simple yet profound. Frodo smiled faintly, gratitude shining in his tired eyes. Thank you, Sam, for always believing, even when I forget how. They lingered a while longer, allowing the peace of the hollow to seep into their bones. Aragorn spoke cantly of the old tales surrounding Neldoril, of rangers who had rested here after long patrols, of elves who once sang beneath the very tree that now sheltered them. It was a reminder that even the darkest times could not erase the memory of light entirely. As the sun climbed higher, Aragorn finally rose, brushing dust from his cloak. The road still lies ahead, and rest, though precious, cannot hold us here forever. But carry this peace with you, Frodo. Let it remind you that even in the heart of darkness, there is always a place where light endures. Frodo stood, the weight of the ring settling once more against his chest. But it felt different now, not lighter, but less consuming, as though the strength of this place had woven itself into his resolve. Sam shouldered his pack with a determined nod. Right then, on we go. Can't have Mordor thinking we've lost our way, now can we? They shared a quiet laugh, the first in days, and began their descent from the hollow, the path winding gently toward the east. The glen faded behind them, but its warmth lingered in their hearts, a quiet reassurance that the journey, though perilous, was not without hope. And as they walked, the light of the sun stretched long across the land, casting golden rays upon the path ahead, a silent promise that, no matter how deep the shadows grew, dawn would always find a way to break through.